Okay, and I'm supposed to moderate this panel. I didn't have a bio for Dr. Endry. I see she's here. I don't know if she's on the panel.
I
I only
sent,
had Dr. Obanya, Dr. Gillespie, and Dr. Kosa.
I sent
Okay,
my bio.
maybe I'm in the wrong panel, so let me exit.
Yeah. Okay. But I sent my bio.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
This is the first time I saw your name on the
Yeah.
email,
Yeah.
but when they sent the bios, I never saw your name there. So
Yeah.
I thought that, in fact, you were being replaced by, I think.
Okay. I'll be happy to be replaced and just listen.
Well, no, you're here now, and I don't see Dr. Kosa.
Okay.
Here.
I sent my bio to Mr. Bekwe. So
Okay.
he received it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I welcome you. I'm just caught off guard. I don't have the bio to properly introduce you. But I guess if you sent it to me now, I could have it.
Okay. What is your email?
Okay, I'll write it in the chat.
Okay, great. Okay, is it EAH? That's the one?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to forward what I sent to Mr. Bekwe. Okay.
Okay. And yes. In fact, now, yeah, because everyone now, I would imagine if Dr. Kosa is going to join us, I'm not sure if he will or not, but then it would mean that everyone would have 10 minutes. If Dr. Kosa does not come, then everyone would have roughly 13 minutes. Okay, and I see Magdi Shajli, if you could introduce yourself so I could know who you are. Because the speakers that I have, Dr. Fred Ahwa, Dr. Kosa, Dr. Gillespie, and I don't see Dr. Fred Ahwa on here. Okay, so yes, so at this time, I think we'll begin with Dr. Obanya, Dr. Gillespie, and Dr. Lumumba. So
I have just sent you my bio.
okay. So I would still imagine since we've already almost 10 minutes into the timing, we will still wrap up at what would be 12:50 my time. Okay, so what we'll do is I'll just allot people time accordingly so that we can finish in the allotted time. And I would imagine the other people here are not participants, but are just joining the session. Okay. Give me 1 second. Let me adjust my. Okay. So, yeah, Dr. Lumumba, I'll just have you go last, and then that way I can look at your bio.
Great, thank you.
Yes. Okay, officially, greetings everyone and all protocols observed. I would like to welcome everyone to this great panel that is being brought to you by the Association of African Universities and all of its wonderful sponsors. This particular panel is themed Reorienting the African Educational Thought. And I'm excited about the panel. We have a well-rounded, well-qualified group of experts, all of which have interesting backgrounds that intersect with their specialties in ways that I'm confident will make for a most engaging and meaningful exchange. To introduce myself to you, the listening audience, who I appreciate and so thankful that you took time to join us or to watch this in its recording. I am Ezra Haron. I'm a professor of global societies at Delaware State University in the US. I'm also the conceptualizer and the founding director of the Center for Global Africa at Delaware State. In addition to that, I'm the author of 3 books that have great relevance to the topics that we'll discuss here today. My work centers on the concept and consciousness of sovereignty from an African-centered perspective, where I examine sovereignty through historical and contemporary lenses as a means to harness and apply the best of institutional and socioeconomic applications that will advance Africa and diasporic communities. The Center for Global Africa at Delaware State is important because it links to 2 very significant historical constructs. One being historically Black colleges and universities, of which Delaware State University is among. In the US, we have over 100 Black universities that date all the way back to foundings as early as 1837. So we have over 100 of these universities. Delaware State itself is 131 years old, okay? And so that background of our intelligentsia, our historically Black colleges, is important in terms of diasporic intellectual capital that we provide or can provide to Agenda 2063 and Africa's evolution. And the second historical construct is our connection to the African Union, to the 6th region. We were founded in 2018 as a 6th region institution in partnership with the African Union through the Agency of African Peer Review Mechanism. And so having that distinction of partnership, the CGA, or the Center for Global Africa, we operate as an intermediary with HBCUs and the diaspora community in general for engagements in Africa that are solution-oriented, capacity building, and mutually beneficial. So it is that background that has me here today. and our evolving relationship with the Association of African Universities. And so I'm thankful and honored that they invited me here, invited the Center for Global Africa to chair this important panel. And our panelists today, and I'll introduce everyone formally before they take to the air. But we have today with us, and let me make sure everyone is here. We have Dr. Sandra Gillespie.
Morning.
We have Dr. Asa Lumumba with us, and we have Dr. Obanya with us today. And interestingly, Dr. Obanya, with his extensive background, he is going to be our keynote speaker today. And along with us, we have our rapporteur, Ajiman Okere Darko, with us, I believe, is with us. But first, before I bring on our esteemed panelists, let me give you some background about the session. As I said, the topic today is reorienting the African educational thought. And if we broke that down, we have several important keywords right in the theme itself: reorienting, educational, and thought, all of which are extremely important. So today, what we're going to look at is, with consideration to the complexities of historical and contemporary causes, influences, and impacts that have both detrimentally and beneficially shaped Africa's present-day intellectual lenses and academic systems. This panel today will critique, discuss, and most importantly, present informed positions and approaches to do just that: reorientate African educational thought, really in epistemological kinds of ways that can instrumentalize processes for Africa to become a consequential provider and a driver of intellectual and human capital, all of which the future demands, and specifically Africa needs to take its rightful place, to regain its rightful place as a great leader and contributor to this global design that the 21st century is birthing. And all of these things are being done through many great vehicles, one of which, Agenda 2063, the African Union's 50-year blueprint and development plan for an African Renaissance, which the Center for Global Africa is closely and tightly committed. So with that, I'm going to introduce our keynote presenter today, Dr. Obanya, who amongst many distinctions is and received honors, all of these, and I'll mention some of them: Commander of the Order of the National Lion of the Republic of Senegal. He's an international educational strategist known as the Grand Sage of Education in Africa, named by the DEA in 2013 as Outstanding Mentor of Educational Researchers in Africa. He's a fellow of the Curriculum Organization of Nigeria, the Nigerian Academy of Education, the Nigerian Institute of Management. He's authored over 300 publications on various aspects of education. He's a retired director of UNESCO and a past chair of the West African Examinations Council, and a designer of Nigeria's Universal Basic Educational Program. He is also a professor emeritus at the Institute of Education in Nigeria, the University of Ibadan, Nigeria. Dr. Obanya, thank you for joining us today. And I give you the air for your keynote presentation.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Is it possible to show my slides from that end? I was told it will be done from there.
Yes, please, Prof. It will be ready. It's ready.
Can we go on then?
All right.
I'm waiting.
Okay, it's coming.
Okay. I can't read it. It's okay. I've titled the presentation "Winning Back the Education That Africa Lost." And those who know me know that it's a doctrine that I've preached in many places. So I may be repeating myself, but if I should go straight to the next slide, please go on, sir. Oh, la, la. Yes. I'll talk briefly in 5 mini parts. I'll give an orientation to my talk, and then I go on to the basics of African traditional education, and then try to see where we have derailed in Africa since we started reforms since independence, and end up with suggestions for a turnaround strategy, along with some take-home messages for this further discussion. Now to the orientation. Okay. The orientation, go ahead first. Go ahead.
Yes,
The orientation simply is what Dr. Isili must have heard from me, that Africa lost its education the moment it lost its dignity. We lost our dignity through colonialism. And this is what I'm going to dwell on so much by highlighting the key features of African traditional education, only to show that education has always been with us, and then highlight what we've tried to do since independence, since we disagreed with colonially inherited education to reform. In the reforming, we made so many mistakes. And to bring back education that Africa lost, we have first to go back to what tradition used to do and enrich it with whatever lesson we can learn from modern trends. And as I said, I will end up with some practical suggestions. Can we go ahead, sir? Next slide. Oh, la, la. Go ahead, sir. Now, education, I keep repeating this. In all the books I've written, I've started by defining education by saying what it's not, because people tend to mistake it for the things I've listed here. They think if you've been through school and the school has not been through you, you are educated. We also think that once we speak our English, French, and Portuguese, we're educated. We also think that once we can recite so many things we have memorized, but not totally internalized, that we've educated. And that if we can read and write and follow graphics and tables, we're educated. Or if we can manipulate some batteries and other things, no. Education is a lot more than all this, although all this is also included. And the next slide will show us what I believe education should do. Now, education, what I say in its true sense. In the beginning, there was education. In other words, wherever human beings have settled together, they've devised ways of life, they've inherited some old practices, and they are busy nurturing the young ones to adapt to the culture of the place. So education has always been there. It has also, as everybody says, never ending. It is both lifelong as you grow older and life-wide as you take on new responsibilities. And it has always been like that with us. Well, it is taking place in school these days, but there's a lot more beyond the school. Everywhere, even in the most developed societies, there are more people learning out of school than in school. So when we say education, we should also consider the out of school population. And it's not pursued in isolation. It goes along with the needs of society, what the society has inherited, the culture is inherited, and the way it's moving. But the major emphasis is on value addition. What transformational change has taken place in the individual, and this idea of enculturation, being bred in such a way that you get deeply become part of the culture into which you are born. Somebody have called it a trinity of knowledge, attitudes, and values. I'll say more about that later. Go on, sir. Next slide. But the ultimate goal of bringing people up, that is raising younger ones, getting the older ones exposed to new ideas and so on, is to achieve in the individual self-actualization, a feeling of, I have done something. And why do you need this? It's for your own continued personal development, but more importantly, for enhanced and quality contribution to society. In other words, we've complained that people we've trained in Africa have not been useful to society. In traditional society, they were, and education that has always been there ensures that you learn what you learn, you acquire the skill you acquire, you broaden the scope of your everything, so that you'll be happy with yourself and you'll be equipped to contribute to a wider society. Ahead. Yes, now I come to the main thing where I would like to outline the key features of African traditional education. And the emphasis here is that education has always been with us. It didn't start with colonialism. It didn't start, with independence. The day the first human beings appeared in Africa, education started. And what are the key features? Let's go to the next slide. The first key feature is that our education had strong philosophical underpinning. In other words, what is good life? We had our ideas of what is good life, and everything we're doing to the younger ones and the adults was to make sure that they lead this good life. And culture, it has been mentioned everywhere, is cornerstone. That's why I said enculturation, getting you to become part of your culture. And it was all inclusive, lifelong learning. There were no dropouts like you have these days. There were even those who had, special needs were catered for. And everything was related to the way of life of the society. If you were in a farming society, in a cattle rearing society, in a fishing society, in a mountain climbing society, you were brought up to fit in. And this continued. Whatever stage of life, you had something you were doing. And I've tested this in villages across Africa when I found that beginning from the toddler to people of my age, men and women, each group had something is doing in society and they are learning how to do it, and goes on. Go on, sir. Oh la la. No, back to the last slide. I couldn't see that, but the last slide on the top there says I've said earlier that education is more than schooling. Strictly speaking, there are at least 4 routes to education, and these routes converge. The first one we think about is incidental learning. By operating these slides, I have learned something I will not do again. 2, informal learning. You're going about life and you are picking up both knowledge and new values and skills. And then the non-formal, and the one I call formalized. People call it formal education. I call it formalized because education has always been there. We brought it to the school and put on a syllabus on the curriculum and all that, and set examinations and said that is education. But in traditional system, the 4 were made to converge. There were non-formal things, but there were also informal and of course, what do you call it? Formalized, because for you to become an artisan, for you to become a hunter, for you to become a warrior, for you to become even a chief, whatever, for you to become a husband and a wife, there were formal ways of preparing people for these roles. So we had an education system, if you can call it by that name, that unified all the four routes of education. And there was this emphasis on life skills. In other words, how would you become an adult if you could not acquire what it takes to live as an adult? And this combined a combination of three types of skills that people don't talk about. You have the technical skills, you have the cognitive skills, but you also have the soft skills, the way you receive visitors, the respect you have for all elders, the way you operate in wider society, and so on, especially with the extended family system and the rest of it. There were ways of getting this done, and that behavior, a part of it, the soft skills were there. And then, of course, the go-getter skills, which you might call entrepreneurial skills. Even if you were taught to mold basket in a particular way, the day you created something different, you were rewarded for it. And the educator, I don't want to say the teacher, was respected. Why? Because in such societies, the learned person, the man who's acquired some skill, the elderly person was the treasure of knowledge, and they were respected. I will see later whether the educator is still respected in Africa. And how did we teach? How did we teach? Today, you talk of playway method, you talk of interactive methods, you talk of activity-based learning and all the rest of it. And of course, you talk about experiential learning, where I am farming by your side, you are farming by my side, and you imitate what I'm doing. It wasn't a question of a lecturer standing out there and dishing out ideas and somebody taking notes and occasionally saying, do you understand? No, it is a question of acting together with the teacher, the one who's bringing you up. And so, and these are things that we inherited that we seem to have lost, and we need to bring them back into today's education. Now, to go on to the next session. Go ahead. Now, we at Independence, if we were to read the education books of 1960, you talk about the inherited Western education, and we criticize it a lot. And then we attempted over the past 50, 60 years to do things right, but we did derail, as I will show in the next slide. Now, I treat education from two sides, as a coin with two sides. The first side I called PPM, the policy, the planning, and the management. And the other side I call CTL, curriculum, teaching, and learning. In other words, what happens before the thing is packaged to the school, and what happens when you are at the school level. Now, there are 10 things that I will run after. I will run through them quickly. Number one is related to what I've already said. There's a myopic conception of education as schooling. Whenever we talk of schooling, yes, primary, secondary, tertiary. I think it's a lot more than that. Number two, policy, and people have been saying about people being good at making policies, but not good at implementation. It is fake. We're not making policies at all, because what we do is dictation. From today, from next week, this must happen. From next year, this must happen. And then you go to the people who say you are sensitizing them. They should be sensitizing you. And that has resulted in number three, where we say education for all, but it has been education for them, the downtrodden, not for us. And you can see that with the growth in the number of private institutions in Africa the past years. And there's a joke now that once you're a member of parliament and all that, your children get educated overseas. And we've also been trying to plan, but everywhere you go, there's a word about. meaning you are not sure of the figures. Everywhere, the census figures, all that, they're not accurate. So we have this, what I've called data drought. And then there is a case going on in Nigeria now where lecturers, university teachers are on strike, and they're accusing government of developing political universities. And it has happened that, especially at a higher level, when we don't plan the expansion. I come from village A, that village A must have a university. And so the resources are spread through the state. And you become a manager in the education system because of the number of years you spent in the classroom. So everything is amateurish. The management is questionable. And number 7, access. When we talk of access, there's a question of there's a meaningful and non-meaningful access. That is, if you were to draw a graph, those who enrolled and go on to those who go on to attend, those who go on to make progress, those who go on to finish and to transit, you find the graph goes down, 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 down. So it's not meaningful access. So many go in and very little come out. And so that has created inequity in all its forms. Whether if you live in a village, you don't have the same opportunities as those who live in the city. If you're in the city, we have what we call government reserved areas, and we have the low down areas. And of course, if you're a girl or a woman, that is also there. But number 9 is quite interesting. I listened to discussions this morning and they talked about funding. The problem in Africa is not just how much is voted for education, but where does the money go to? By the time you have a ministry for higher education, a ministry for technical education, a ministry for primary education and all that, and each minister has an assistant and each director has a deputy director, the money then goes to things that are not really important. Whereas if the money had been channeled to infrastructure, to teachers, to facilities, and so on. So where you spend the money on non-essentials, it is mere spending, my word. But where you channel it to what you make a difference, it is investing. And we've tended to spend more than invest. And these days, number 10, everybody talks about technology. And you can see the problem we had even starting this session. It is due to the fact that we're not in line yet in Africa, so we cannot be online. And what does that mean? If the technical facilities are not there, and if the personal competence to manipulate is not there, and then you say, let's go online and all that, I'm not saying we should not, but I'm saying we have to make sure that the society gets in line before we can go online. And when it comes to what happens at the school level, now, as I said, when you go into our schools now, what you are shown are buildings, new ones, but the things that make education happen, the teachers, the facilities, the management structure, and so on, relationship with the community are becoming totally absent. So I'm saying we need to bring back education to the school. The same thing, I'm sorry, we have this I call curriculum appetite, meaning we say these children, a group of children are science oriented, the others are arts oriented. I think in our traditional education, everybody was exposed to virtually everything. And I can go on and on. Number 4 is very important here. We're talking, you need technical vocational education. But what we've been saying is if you cannot cope with academic work you do, you go technical, which is again fake because you need a head to console the hands. And we can go on. Well, let me go straight to number 7, where we now instill examinations at every stage. And our examination is to chalk out some people. That instead of helping children grow, we are sending them out. And so, and of course, the one everybody talks about is the wide skills gap. When people get out, what are they able to do? So having said this, how can we change things? Next slide. Go on, go on, next one. Aha. So go on. So there are 2 sides, as I said earlier, in terms of policy. we have to go back to education with a capital E. That is the one that goes beyond schooling. And our policy development should be such an inclusive process that they make sure that everybody is involved. So we have genuine education for all instead of education by all. And that means society just have to fall in line for everything, because that was the way it used to be. These days also, we have what we call education sector strategic plans. They become mere documents, because a genuine plan is the internalized ideal and not just a mere published document. So if some of us get up in an air-conditioned room and put up a 20-page paper and call it strategic plan, it will never work. And that's what is happening. And then management and teaching, we're not professionalizing. And as I said earlier, we have to go back to genuinely invest in education. When there was no monetary economy, people invested all their energy and time and education. So merely spending does not help us. And go on, sir. Next. So, and when it comes to curriculum and teaching, I will run through, it's again repeating what I've just said. We bring education back to the school, meaning the schools must really educate and not just be a mere building. And we'll have to get a teacher, meaning, because what is happening in Africa is teaching has been so downgraded that it has become those, the least able, the least willing who go to teach. And so what they do is not teaching. And teaching is the only profession in Africa where you don't have continuous development, teacher education and development. And this question I mentioned is curriculum apartheid. And yes, I hear people talking about face-to-face teaching. Ladies and gentlemen, genuine teaching has never been face-to-face. It's been mind-to-mind. I take you through a process, and the end of the process, I see. That's it. And as we used to do before, we're building experiential learning, meaning you are learning to cook, you go in there and so on. Today, if we were to link up with industry, and I mean industry in the true sense, including everybody who is performing, not just the corporations, if we were to link up with them, that there is exposure to what is happening outside, and that outside is also comes into the school, you produce experiential learning, which is not just memorization. And instead of the disease we call formal examinations, continuous assessment, something that helps people to discover themselves and to grow steadily. And of course, I'm in support of technology support, but with the proviso that we have to be in line to be online. And I will end with the next slide. Next slide. So going forward, let's return to education with a capital E, which means all forms beyond the school. And it should be for all, by all, and with all, because that was the way it has always been, and it worked. And to get this done, we have to learn from what I said earlier, what we had lost in African education, and then correcting the bad steps we've taken, the false steps we've taken over the years. Make sure that teachers come into the system as genuine teachers so that schools may genuinely educate. And number 6 is something looking forward, embedding 21st century skills. To me, these 21st century skills are simple, 3 categories. Cognitive skills, what you know. And they call hard skills too. Emotional skills, who you are, and imaginative skills, what you can do. Because you need one for the other, and you need 2 for the third one. And doing that, taking full advantage of technology, as I said earlier, and genuinely invest in education. Invest in education. But when we invest, we keep talking about political will in Africa. We forget there is also a social will. If as a politician, as a policymaker, as a manager, you get people to think along with you and act along with you, you create a social will. And that is one thing we've not done properly. That is why we come up with projects and they never get to the ground. And what will we be doing? The purpose of all this is in the last sentence. That is nurturing human talents for Africa's development. Yeah, next one. Next. I end here, sir.
Dr. Obanya, thank you so much. Very informative presentation. I think the understanding of education being beyond a classroom setting, that it's beyond a formal environment, that it's philosophical, cultural, lifelong, their life skills, and the idea that education in terms of policy needs to be developed, not dictated. The idea of investing in education rather than spending money, all of those are key things that stand out, at least to me. And we'll revisit your points by the end. If anyone has any questions, we'll direct them to you. We're going to move on. I see we do have 3 panelists in the order of Dr. Gillespie, Dr. Kosa, and then Dr. Lumumba. We will proceed. I think everyone has about a tight 10 minutes. So make sure you make your presentation concise within that time, and keep an eye on me sending you a message directly to you in the chat if your time begins to go over the limit. Okay, and so next we're going to have Dr. Gillespie, who has an interest in Sino-African relations that was formalized in her graduate studies at McGill and the University of Toronto in Canada. She has studied and taught in Canada, China, and Japan. And she resides in New York at this time, where she's involved in the arts, and she works for the City University of New York. Dr. Gillespie is also currently working on a project to memorialize the life and legacy of Ghanaian scholar and author, Mr. Emmanuel John Heavey. I believe I pronounced that correctly, Heavey. So we're going to bring on now Dr. Gillespie, Dr. Sandra Gillespie. The mic is yours.
Thank you very much, sir, and a pleasure to be here and join this esteemed panel. I'm very pleased to be on the same panel once again with Dr. Obanya. We first met in Rwanda in 2014, and in that particular conference was similar to this in that they were talking about, they were talking about similar issues and university linkages in a South-South dimension. But the South-South dimension, sort of that was my field and my opportunity to contribute a little bit to the conversation. And in that room, Dr. Obanya once again held forth, and we all learned from him as we did again today. So I'm very glad to see him and to be in his audience. I was very curious and would like to know more perhaps about the 4 roots of education. I made very quick notes as the slide went back and forth, but to me, those roots are fundamental to moving forward within the continent and perhaps beyond in creating university linkages, particularly in the South. And I wonder, sir, if Dr. Obanya might tell us a little bit more about those 4 roots, and just to reiterate and share a little bit in greater detail.
Okay, that was a question directly to Dr. Obanya?
Yes, sir. Or but perhaps we can start there. And of course, other members have points to make about those 4 roots. I just think the roots perhaps are the most fundamental to this conversation. As Dr. Obanya said, to go back to those roots, it would be helpful perhaps to me to understand them more clearly.
Okay. Can I go ahead?
Please.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Okay. 4 roots. I'm saying, first of all, they are convergent roots. You don't what do you call it? Rule out anyone. the first I said is incidental. You're just going about life and something happens to you. As we say, some of the languages I speak, if you're working and you're crossing something and you just fall on the other side, you've learned a trick. The other one is the informal. We are gathered here and we meet, we need to do certain things. It wasn't planned. While the two are interrelated, then the non-formal one, meaning it's not really a school, but I'm a motor mechanic, for example, as happens in my environment. And right in a shed, some boys and girls who've dropped out of school or that are learning from me. We don't have a formal curriculum, formal teacher training and all the rest of it. Although in countries like Togo, these are well organized now. You can get certificates and all the rest. Then you have the formalized. I refuse to call it formal because there's no way you could teach, I don't know, mathematics without going back to be non-formal, because you have to create activities. You have to tell young people, sit together and solve this problem. And you may in the process start dancing and singing if you teach at the lower level. So there's no way. You need all this, the non-formal methodology, the informal methodology to enrich the conventional one, because it is then makes it into life. That's all I say. I'm only saying that if the four converge, if you don't get all the four, you've lost something. But we should not just take the school and make it what people say theoretical, teacher talking and the others writing notes and passing examinations, but not learning other things. Because without that, they can't fit into society.
Thank you very much. That's very clarifying for me and perhaps to other members up on the panel, that the four roots of education are not independent roots, but as you say, they converge.
They converge, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And of those four roots, perhaps they all need to be strengthened, not independently, but as one. Is there one particular route that needs to be focused on at the moment more than the other, or is it simply?
No, you cannot. Education, the formal one we're talking about now, we've neglected the rest. If you take care of the home, particularly the women, you're already strengthening, because education starts at conception. If you get people to live in decent societies and learn cleaner habits and all the rest, preventive medicine and all the rest, which was there in pre-colonial times, you have every young man and the young woman learn to do whatever their parents are doing, probably adding their knowledge of physiology and pharmacology into it. They are making society grow. And in Rwanda, the case I was making was for universities to have social laboratories instead of the physical laboratory. So if you're teaching marketing and you're there telling them about a book by Johnson and Hanson, you've not done anything. But if you were to take them to a local market and see how in their Lingala languages they attract customers, that's a soft skill you have not acquired. And so all this question of fitting into life after school will be more, will be reduced to a minimum, because people in life would have had this experience, what I call experiential learning in another case.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the reference to your talk in Rwanda, which I reviewed for meeting you here today. So once again, a pleasure to sit and speak and listen to you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I also want to announce that I am here, Dr. Fred Awa. I am on site, so you may not see my name written. Oh, okay, it's just changed. It was AAU. So I am here just in case you think the discussant is not in there. I'm just reminding you that I am on site, and if there are needs for me to make interventions, I will be ready to make my inputs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Awa. Just saw that you are here, so we'll give you a chance formally with your points. Okay, and so our next discussion that we'll have, I see Dr. Kosa is also here, if I'm correct.
Yes, I'm here, and I have sent a text message to you requesting that you move me to be the last discussant to intervene, because I just got in here that don't have a full context. So if Dr. Lumumba, Asia Lumumba can go ahead, is that all right?
Yes,
I
and
was,
Yes,
I was
think-
last.
okay.
yeah, she
Oh,
was
okay.
supposed to be last. She was supposed to be last, but
Okay,
I
that's
think
fine.
she's almost next.
Okay.
So, yeah, we do have Dr. Lumumba, yourself, Dr. Kosa, and
Okay.
then Dr. Awa. So
Okay, that's fine. I can at least
you
just
can
ask a
interchange.
question. Yeah, I can ask a question, then I come back if I think of something else. But thank you. The pieces that I got from the presentation, Dr. Obanya, thank you very much for those the lines that you had shared. I believe there's been much richer conversation before I got on board here with the challenge of time zones and all of that. So one of the questions that I wanted to pose at this point is, how might an education for all, by all, and with all? And I like that because it's really very encompassing. It is not top down when we educate certain populations, but it is all of us included in that process of education. So for all, by all, with all look like, and particularly given the context in which we speak about schooling, and I heard you make mention of schooling versus education or learning, and we speak of schooling in terms of the four walls and all of those contexts. And we don't often speak of schooling as the entire community is a school, basically, that the communities in which we live are part of that school. They are an integral part of the process of learning. And you just gave some examples about going to the market and the mother teaching kids. So I actually don't like the idea, and I like you say formalized, but I don't like the idea of the divisions of formal, informal, non-formal, and all that, because I think all of that kind of creates a hierarchy in education, as if informal, what we call informal is less important than what is formal and what is not formal. But I like the convergency idea, because all of these things are really intermingled, and why do we have to even categorize one as more important than the other, and so on. So yeah, so how might it look like? And particularly given the fact that our governments and all of these, they're really built on nation states that are colonial in nature, and every way of thinking about country and nation is a very colonial way of thinking. It's a legacy of colonialism. And so that plays out to the power dynamics of negotiating these policies and curriculum development and implementation, and even the nature of education. So if we are going to have an education for all, by all, and with all, that means this power dynamics has to shift. We cannot have a dictation from government that is very, Afro-colonial in nature, and then have dictations from Western, powers that are neo-colonial, imperialistic in nature, that undermine these other things, these wonderful things that happen in communities, and that the inherited knowledges we have, undermine all of these, the ancestral wisdoms that we have, that we are not even putting in place in our education. So how might this look like? Because the policies are really very driven by Western, ways of thinking about education. And you're thinking very revolutionary, in a revolutionary manner about education here. But when it comes to negotiating the actual policy of the country, they're not thinking in that way. And then thinking also in terms of the curriculum, there's still this idea of curriculum that has to be, look a certain way. And so you have international agencies having to come and help Africans develop curriculum when we already have curriculum. We already have all these things going, but the power dynamics are still very evident, and our very own structures do not allow for some of the things that you and I and others in this group want to see happen. You know, there's
Yes.
always going to be. So yes, I just want your comment on that.
And I think it's this power dynamic that will have to change progressively. Because what does democracy mean? Does it mean some people talking and the others keeping quiet? Because the mistake we've made, one way of the real that I said, you call people like me to a six-star hotel or even to Addis Ababa and we produce education strategy for Africa. The average African, even people, I don't know, in Johannesburg and Lagos don't even know what we're talking about. And you cannot practice democracy without decentralization of administration in such a way that, I don't know if you are from South Africa, if you live in Soweto, you are not the same, you don't have the same facilities as those who live elsewhere in the same Johannesburg. But somebody living that elsewhere has given you something, say that's the education. That's education for them and not for us. And the few countries I know in Africa, you notice that since independence, the number of private schools has grown so much. I've been in places where the Ministry of Education is organizing a conference like this, and they bring students to perform some dancing, and these dancers come from private schools. And I once led a World Bank delegation to an African country talking education, and the minister I led said, "Oh, thank God my children are not even schooling in this country." So that's what and I immediately interjected, and I almost lost my question that it is education for all and not. Nigerian lecturers have been on strike for 6 months, and every day what they are complaining about, some minister goes abroad for the graduation of his child in University of Swansea or Lakeside anywhere in Ottawa. And the person comes back proud of it with photographs in the papers, and they are saying, and then in every society you are in, there are people who've been excluded. There could be nomads, they could be rural dwellers, they could be refugees from neighboring countries, and so on. And in most cases, there'll be more women and more girls. Now, I'm saying, my experience, I've practiced it. If you sat down with the people, and they will be surprised how much you can learn from them, which means they contribute to making the policy. I see policy not a document, but what people have internalized. The moment people tell you, how do you do that? We don't do that here. And you are moderating your dues, you are modifying, you already implemented. Because those attitudes of theirs could be, what do you call it, a stumbling block to implementation. But once you've taken care of that, now, if you allow them to contribute to the ideas, you may discover that all the ideas you've learned in your psychology books, that they also have it in their own customs, and you may not be losing anything. So, and it will become a consensus. That's the policy is by all. But the execution also, you may find you are teaching nutrition, and these people have their own ways of balancing their diet. If they join you in doing the teaching, I think you'll be achieving more than others. But the important thing here is as what you said about curriculum. Curriculum for me is not just that package, the syllabus. The curriculum has 3 interrelated elements. One is the context. The context in which you develop it is the most important. That one determines the package. But the package may not achieve the goal if you don't have the processes. So for you to teach the child who has to go to the farm before coming to school, there will be a different way of reorganizing the school, a different way of dealing with the teaching. For you to teach a person in his own language that he can already speak, for you have to draw from the folklore and the rest of it to enrich it. Otherwise, you just be, you're educating them for another society. We are saying, by all, it is not an easy process, but if it starts, the politician is going to gain by it because the results will be there first. the dialogue that the policy dialogue that goes on should not be something restricted to 5-star hotels, and it should not be something to be attended by you and I only, by these others, and let them guide us. 2, the content itself will be related as much as possible to their life, because what you call enculturation is start from what you know and move out gradually. But you know, there was a part of Africa, you say straight for English. The one you are saying, Diki, Janga, sat on the Janga. Even the teacher doesn't know what he's saying. But these people have their own local ones. Even you can translate into anything, and they will participate. Even ways of correcting student behavior or children's behavior vary also from culture to culture. But our traditional teacher has a cane, and that tends to drive people from school. And then this thing we call examinations. If you don't know it, you are a fool. But if you send your child to these so-called developed countries, you find that the teacher goes to the level of the student and raises the student gradually. In our own case, we assume this is the status, and if you don't get there, you are a fool. Everybody is educable. It is that curriculum process that is how you handle, because what you get from government agencies are just mere guidelines. It is a teacher who is really curriculum developer, because he has to make this happen. And what is curriculum? Its meaning is simple: education down to earthness. Say education for national unity. What does it translate to? Down in the classroom and the school. And the teacher and the school managers are in charge of that. So if we, to answer your questions, this is just, it's not an opinion, it's based on experience. When you sit with the real people, UNICEF calls them the need bearers. For example, if I'm developing education for women, I've never been a woman, so I don't know what it feels to be one, so it won't work. But if I get the women to shout on me first, we start by shouting, then we come to consensus. And then we'll be saying we and not them. Is that we, lack of we, in everything we do that doesn't make sense? So it will, at first, it will be differentiated from zone to zone, from class to class, but the result will come to the same thing. That is, there will be transformation, and there'll be more people, because the greater the number of people, what do you call it in English, that you raise, then you raise the country. But if you stick to what we have now, with all the dropouts and so on, there are the people with PhDs and higher than PhD, and the country will still be backward. And if we practice curriculum apartheid, where we say because you're not doing good in school, you go and learn to use your hands, you forget that it's the head that called it the hands. And that's why you will not have, you may have physicists, but you will not have motor mechanics, you will not have electricians, and these are important people in society. So it is difficult. The powers that be may not accept it readily, but if we start, and most of the projects you see that come from outside are aiming at such things: disadvantaged children, what do you call it, handicapped, and all the rest of it. So it is a question of diversifying the procedures to suit the needs of every group. I'm sorry if I've taken so much time. I hope we'll continue by email.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have any other time to pose follow-up questions or comment, but if not, I'll let others go on. But thank you very much for your engagement.
I'm learning.
Thanks. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kosa. And just by brief introduction, Dr. Kosa is a professor at the College of Education at Pennsylvania State University. He has a book, Power, Politics in Higher Education, International Regimes, Local Governments, and Educational Anatomy. As well, he has engaged a new theory, meaning external to modernity, which he coins Cosmo Ubuntu, which I think is very important and kind of supports the positions that he just posed to Dr. Obanya. Thank you for that. And next, Dr. Lumumba, if you are prepared, I will just give a
Yes.
I'll give just a very brief intro to you. Dr. Lumumba is a professor of Africana Studies and the director of the Institute for African Development at Cornell University. She's also the president of the World Council of Comparative Education Societies, a distinguished visiting professor, and a litany of accomplishments and awards. Dr. Lumumba, please. We have roughly a little more than 15 minutes before the official time limit. So excuse the very brief introduction.
Yes. No, this is fine. You hear me? You could have just said my name to save the time so that I can use my few words to say that I have been the most blessed person to have had Professor Obanya as my teacher, my mentor for 40 years. We met first in Togo while I was teaching in an international doctoral program based in Togo. And he came there, and the chemistry, the amazement is still very much the same today in different spaces. So I am so blessed, Professor Obanya. And well, I was there when you received the award of distinguished mentor, because this is what you have done and continue to do. I have just a few comments. I would like to briefly use Cheikh Hamidou Khan, his book, L'Aventure Ambiguë, The Ambiguous Adventure. Allow me in 1 or 2 minutes to quote when he said, if I told my people to go to the new school, meaning the colonial school, they would go en masse. But learning with the European content and method, they would also forget. Would what they would learn to be worth as much as what they would forget? I should like to ask, can one learn this without forgetting that? And is what one learns worth what one forgets? So some of the fundamental issues that we face is how in the colonial context, it was this binary, either or. We are civilized, you are not civilized. You have to learn our way so that you can be useful in our colonial project. Don't learn your way, don't value your way. So it's either or. So that's why in the title of the panel, I would like to add to what we have said, or what has been said, building on our assets and achievement. That's critical when we talk about reorienting. Reorienting is critical to have this past achievement. And it's not a past achievement frozen. The idea of a static Africa, Africa would have evolved without the colonial intrusion. So how do we think of that evolution while retrieving from our capacity what was built for thousands of years? So that's areas that I would like you to articulate further, and particularly focusing on the gender dimension. As you know, is one of my really critical areas, how we bring the gender, women's contribution and value them. And going back to our languages, where you don't have mankind, the European conceptualized system of man at the center of the universe, or European men, as Sheikh Anta Diop clearly articulated. So how do we bring that together when you talk about mind to mind, not simply face to face, and the quest for what we can take from this European, also it is based on violence and all that. But what can we freely take from it, and build on, while using our cultural reference and ways? So I have much more, Professor, as you know, to ask, to say, because I'm always hungry of hearing from you. But I will limit to this question because of lack of time. Thank you.
What? The chair could have allowed me to introduce you.
It was, I just followed the directives that AAU gave, so.
Well, one of those things that happened to me was learning and using French. That made me a pure African. And in the process, I read Sheikh Hamidou Kane way back in 1965, 66. And I organized a 60th birthday, a 70th birthday as director of UNESCO in Dakar. And so, and I keep reading, I'm part of all of them. Now let's go to straight. How do we build on our past? What had been built up over the years? First of all, that over the years, to build the fact that education was always there. And it was related, closely related to the needs of society, not just immediate needs, but needs. And it touched everybody in every group. And then it was, like to respond to that one, it was suited to the needs of each society, meaning you were brought up, again, it was rooted in culture, which is this, and it did not preclude you getting any other culture, because groups and communities were mixing and intermarrying and moving before colonial times. Those of you from the southern part of Cote d'Ivoire, the Kwesi Kwajos and the Ouedragos, they were moving before the French came. In fact, the French introduced tribalism like they did everywhere, but take it more seriously. But if we take education first in the true sense, that is not just schooling, two, that it starts from conception, meaning the care you take of the pregnant woman is already doing something to the unborn child. Taking it also that the mother is the first teacher. What you might call do this, don't do that, which is what acculturation is all about. Taking it that the exposure, it was learning by exposure, not because I told you. And taking it that the teacher was somebody who at least was respected because he or she knows what others don't know, whether he was a craftsman or a hunter or a warrior or simple farmer or trade, whatever. He or she was at another level. And taking it also that communal life was also the norm. Where I'm seated here, I don't know how many people live in my house, and I don't know what relations. In my language, there's no word for cousins and uncles and all that. You're either a father, a mother, a brother, a sister. Taking it that the community was also your teacher, and the school was not something you built at the back of the village. People had the habit of going towards the river at the back, but the school is on the other side. You notice, I've not had that experience. You build a school and people won't attend because it's not in their nature of movement. Taking it that the school, the parents had a role to play, the community had a role to play, and it was a process that goes with your level of maturation as you go on and go on. And whether you were man or woman, you had roles, specific roles to play, and you were prepared for those roles. And as you go from being a young man, young woman, to from child to adolescent to to youth, to elderly. You had roles to play and you were prepared for those roles. And there was a sanction everywhere because there were modes, roles you had to play, there were modes of behavior and all the rest of it. Your education was, your behavior was sanctioned by the entire community. If you saw two boys boxing, you stopped them too. You didn't call the police. And there was no prison. There was no prison. There was people with what we call learning physical disabilities. Everybody, there were no beggars in the streets. If you haven't got your two legs and the other boys are working the farm, you use your whistle and you played music for them when they did it, and so on. So how then did we come with gender inequity in education? Because colonial education started by being selective. First you cited where you could reach, then you emphasize faith, I mean, not religion in the true sense, but whether Islam or that. And then the private secondary schools were built first for boys only. It took some time for girls to even come in. And girls or women were given jobs even when they've been to school. They're either teachers or nurses or typists. So you didn't get them to do, you say, oh, a woman cannot do technical this and that. And we seem to have inherited all that. So if we were to go back to say, how did our foreparents do this? They did all these faults. What can we learn from their experience? And you can also do that by involving them, because there are more native people in Africa than those of us who speak English and French. And until we bring them up, like China has done, we've not developed anything. So our education should aim at bringing them up so that there will be a critical mass of people who can get things done. These days you got creativity, innovation, and if people say you don't put salt with oil and you do that, you create a problem. But if you learn to use the salt first and then create something, so I'm saying if we can't solidify what we have, we cannot even borrow from outside. But borrowing from outside because we have no time. If you look at education in the broadest sense, because there are always more people out of school than school. And instead of planning just the school system, we plan an education system, which means wherever you find yourself, you have needs for self-actualization, and we help you to actualize. Two, we go back to what was the role of women and what is the changing role of women these days, and build that into what we are doing. That there will be no conflict. The girls do need to work and the boys do physics. Because I don't know why we inherited that. The girls and the technical arm, the girls are in this whereas in America where you live, the child is exposed to a broad general education. So even curriculum must return to broad general education. And we must relate what we learn to the needs of the immediate society. If we want to, because if you want to teach hygiene, let's see how that is done there and see how you can use that known method to enrich. And as for language, I've always said that because my own PhD in those days was saying bilingualism. The more bilingual you are, the more you can even learn other languages. When I learned French, I was 25 years old. I've never studied it anywhere. A year later, I found myself in Dakar managing and so on. And I started learning the names of the ocean, the name of America, and all that in Yoruba language. And I have rich literature behind me here, written and newspapers. So the argument that if you start in your first language, you will not know English or French is fake. You only need to see those who've done it. In fact, you get to know your environment in the language you know best. And since this education so let's start with the language we know best and gradually get the others. And what to borrow from outside. First, we have to borrow the language for the time being. It's the language that even within our countries, that unify us is the one that people use in the books we're in. And then there's this, the world is dominated by new things, science and technology. And I think we must borrow all that, but not just borrow, but domesticate. Our problem has been the failure to domesticate. And then to do this, education planning must go along with other sector planning in society. I'm sorry if I'm not.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate all the in-depth insights. Unfortunately, we are right at the end of our time frame, but I wanted to give Dr. Fred Awa a chance to come in before we close out. And I don't know if our rapporteur is here or not, or another one was assigned, but
I'm here.
yeah.
Yes, they are here in-house.
Okay, great. Then Dr. Awa, you could go ahead and have the final input.
Thank you very much. So I want to acknowledge the brilliant presentation of Professor Obanya, one of my mentors from afar. The first time I met him was in Dakar, Senegal, some 10 years back when I was elected head of the Students of Africa. Because of people like them, where I also decided to get into academia. So reorienting the African educational thought. I do think that this is not an issue of theory. It's already happening on the face of the continent. And Nigeria seems to be coming strongly within these lines within the period. I specifically want to talk about Professor Peter Okebukola and his theory, the cultural techno-contextual approach. Cultural techno-contextual approach. Cultural meaning culture, techno from technology, and context relating to the contextual approach. Now, the theoretical underpinnings of his theory is that when people are taught within their cultural orientations, then they understand issues better. And he draws this from ethnophilosophy as espoused by Osajefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah of blessed memory. Then he takes the technology component from Heidegger, who espoused the issue of techno-philosophy, meaning that teaching and learning can be enhanced when technology is used as a catalyst. Then the contextual bit emphasizes the fact that when you teach people based on examples from their own surroundings, then they would understand concepts better. Now, these have been implemented. I had my doctoral thesis in this area. So I taught people using the cultural techno-contextual approach, taught others using the traditional lecture method, and the evidences were clear that the Afrocentric teaching model yielded better understanding of concepts in public administration than the lecture method. Similar examinations have been done in Burundi and also a myriad of theses in Nigeria. Now, how does it work? The traditional African thinking is that knowledge is transferred from generation to generation through oral traditions. So rather than getting into a classroom and then lecturing, what you do is you rather introduce a topic for the first time. You do not teach. Then you tell them to get back home. You tell the students or people to get back home and then get cultural orientations of that topic from their parents, cousins, mothers, etc., etc. So take, for instance, I teach public administration. So in teaching the topic politics, I introduce it in class and tell the students to ask for information relative to politics from home when they get back. So they get back and they say, Grandpa Obanya, our teacher says, what is politics from traditional viewpoint? I say, oh, politics. You see Mr. Ogundale and Mr. Jegede, when they were struggling to get power to see who would be the chief, that is the beginning of politics. You are showing them politics from a traditional what? Perspective. So you say, okay, division of labor, what does it mean? So, okay, so you see, Ogundale's clan does blacksmithing. Another clan does farming. Another clan is specialized or noted for cattle, raising cattle. That is the concept of division of labor from a traditional perspective. So the students get the orientation of the topic from their cultural thinking. And then they come into the class the next time explaining this. Meanwhile, it is important to state that when they come back, they would have to form groups first of 8 to 10, share their opinions about the cultural orientation of the topic. Then a representative presents on behalf of the entire group in the class. This ensures that there's some level of peer learning amongst the group. Now, because they are getting information from diverse sources from the cultural environment, there are tendencies that there will be misconceptions. So the teacher now takes the responsibility of explaining after the last group leader has presented, clearing the misconceptions, and then emphasizing on the correct issues that, or the right issues that the students would have informed the class about. Now, the technology part of it comes at the end when the teacher summarizes the lecture and then sends it to the students through any appropriate technological means. This could be email, WhatsApp, Facebook, or any that the students and the teacher are comfortable with. So I think that this conversation has come in at the right time, and it is to be informed that Africa has already taken the bull by the horn. I'm a product of the cultural techno-contextual approach. My doctoral thesis was strictly on investigating how culture can be used to enhance teaching from the African perspective. I do think that time is well spent. I can see signals from here, from the back, and I would want to say that this has been an enriching discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Obanya will give you a chance to respond or have closing words, and then if you said our rapporteurs are here, if they want to give a final summary, we'll do that, and we'll close out from that point. But I do think that the conversation very stimulating and one that is to continue. So I would imagine with the WhatsApp group that we have and the common emails that we've shared, we can work together to advance something more formal out of this conversation. But Dr. Obanya, I'll allow you to have a final word, please.
I just have to say thank you for everybody. It's been an opportunity to learn. And I'm always happy to hear Okebukola's name. It means that the person who just spoken is a grandson, because Okebukola happened to be my son, academic. You know, he's been the most distinguished of all those I troubled. So, and I'm happy when I hear his name. So I'm glad to meet again Dr. Ashe Lumumba. When we have time, I'll be asking you about the family. And Dr. Gillespie, talking about Emmanuel John Heavy. Emmanuel John Heavy was a Ghanaian from what we call the Togoland in those days, who taught in the same school with me in 1963. And then she met me in Rwanda looking for him. In the end, he was traced. I think he died 2 years ago. He's been to China and wrote an interesting book and all that. But the important thing anyway is that I've learned a lot from everybody. My ideas have been further enriched, and we do hope that this conference will just be a beginning of many good things to come, that we should go from this talking to doing, and when we do, we learn by doing, so that when we meet again, we'll be exchanging on-the-ground experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
sir.
Thank you.
Yes.
Dr. Ezra Haron, for the opportunity to give a brief summary of what has been said today. Today has been very involving with presentation from the Grand Sage of African Education, Professor Paul Obanya, and discussants like Sandra Gillespie, Jose Kos, Lumumba, and Dr. Fedawa, and the point has been what we have lost with our education in terms of the cultural, technology, and also our African indigenous learning, what we've lost. And the point raised by Sandra Gillespie, looking at how if we could unify the 4 roots of education, which was responded that yes, these roots are not individual, they are together. Jose Coase also brought in the point of convergent formal and informal. I mean, the point of align education to be formal and informal, the need to converge them both, and also bringing in government participation to solidify African curricular development and build up. Professor Paul Banya also reiterated the need to learn from each other, appreciating the divides and halving these divides so we can unify African education from both the haves and have-nots. The need to look beyond examinations and intensify experiential learning, and also unifying both learning, teaching, and also parental influence and building education experience. Dr. Lumumba also brought in the quotes and the need for us to evolve over colonial influence and appreciate gender equality. I would end with Dr. Fedawa's point with the CTCA, Cultural Technical Contextual Approach, which brings on board the environment, indigenous knowledge, technology as a way to enhance our pedagogy and learning from our own selves, what we have nurtured, and be able to understand very well. I'll end with a quote from Prof. Payo Banya that you can learn very well in your environment if it's in your language. This and many more will be put together and shared in the rapporteur's report for the general submission. Thank you very much, Prof. Shah.
And thank you, sir. And thanks to all our great panelists. It was a great and informative, meaningful discussion. And we want to thank Association of African Universities for hosting this along with their great sponsors. And as I said, we look to continue this dialogue moving forward to come up with things that are substantive, that we can work together to demonstrate the grand ideals that we spoke about. If I could just give one allegory, I always say that 1 + 1 is 2. Wherever you go on earth, it's not black, it's not white, it's not Chinese, it's not African, it's just reality. 1 + 1 is 2. But what do you do with that 2? You know, metaphorically, what can that 2 produce? That it's that originality of thought, that innovation of the way people go about expressing that 2 and creating things of great substance out of that 2. That's what's important. So we have to design and create our own substantive and an important metaphorical 2 out of that 1 + 1. So I thank everyone for attending and appreciate everyone and send you best wishes. We'll close out from here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.